As it is written in Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We'll begin our service with the lighting of a candle. The light of life is a finite flame. It burns, it glows, it radiates warmth and beauty, and then it fades and is no more. We must not despair. We are more than a memory vanishing in the darkness. With our lives, we give light. With our light, we illuminate the darkness. Something of us can never die. We move in the eternal cycle of darkness and death, of light and life. As this light burns pure and bright, so may the memory of Steve brighten our own lives. There are 3 ways to mourn. The first is to cry. The second is to grow silent. The third is to transform sorrow into song.
Psalm 23, a Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
A Litany of Remembrance. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. When we have achievements that are based on theirs, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here today to celebrate the memory of my father. When I was pretty young, maybe around 8, my father taught me how to play cards. Specifically, we played a lot of gin rummy. And even though I might have just been 8, I promise you, he did not hold back. That was not in his DNA. My dad gave everything his all. And whether it was playing cards with his daughter or playing his trombone, that's how he lived his life. I'd like to read a poem that makes me think of him. It's called When Great Trees Fall by Maya Angelou. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder. Lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly. Our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory, suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms, slowly and always irregularly. Spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses, restored, never to be the same, whisper to us, they existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. Thank you.
Now I'd like to welcome up Juan to do a short share in remembrance.
Probably what I'm going to say about Steve, you all already know. I met Steve first at the Grand Teton Music Festival as a friend, and to me, somebody who was a legend, because I was like, way down here, and he was like, my God, this giant of a man is in my midst. And over years, many years, he became basically an extended part of my family. He lived through example, which to me was the most amazing thing. He didn't talk about conduct. He lived conduct. He didn't talk about love. He lived love. He didn't talk about generosity. He lived generosity. He always made a point of going to hear colleagues' recitals when they were playing. He was, to me, an example of how to be in this world and how to be a professional musician. All I had to do was just follow, just open my eyes, open my ears to that sound and follow. And I was blessed to hear him also play out at Tetons. I know his brother Greg was there too. The piece to Kleinheimer, the former bass trombonist in the Chicago Symphony. And the thing about Steve, I'm a giant of a man. I'm huge. Steve probably came up to here, but his sound, and we all know his sound was a wall. His sound was a gigantic wall. Do not be fooled by this modest size of a frame. It's an amazing thing at that festival because you sit amongst giants. You sit amongst giants all around you. Gail Williams, Nick Mulcahy, Floyd Cooley, Charlie Butler, Charlie Geyer, Barbara Butler, excuse me. I was going to do that. And not only are they giants, and Steve Norrell, not only are they giants, they are your friends. And you see what humble, kind, loving, giving people they are. He was, to me, a giant and my hero. I was blessed to see him back in May when my teacher, I'm the contrabassist with the Atlanta Symphony, my teacher, Bernard Garfield, turned 100. He was the former principal of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And I was there and I thought, oh my God, Steve is in South Jersey. I wonder. And I called Karen. She came pick me up and we had a wonderful visit. And to say that I love that man is an understatement. I left Atlanta this morning. I will fly back to Atlanta tonight. I knew I had to be here because he is that important a man. And I think to all of you as well. Again, he is a giant and a hero. I love him and I miss him.
Thank you so much, Juan. We're going to have a brief musical interlude. Really, there's nothing more fitting than sharing his music. I'd like to call up Mary to share a brief remembrance.
I hope I can do this properly. I could say that when I worked at the union and Steve was on the board, that I originally told him, you only have to come when you're not too busy, don't worry about it. But he did do everything all the way out because he came every day. He didn't have something he had to do. And I was very grateful for that. But the real reason I wanted to speak today was for my son. People might think that Steve was just a friend of his parents, but that's not true. Maybe in the way you think you're friends of your parents. When Bill was young, he had a lot of problems, and I would start to cry. Everything was hard for him. And when he came out of college, he couldn't find a job. And the thing he always said about Steve was, when I was at my lowest, Steve always paid attention to me and gave me an encouraging word and told me everything would be okay. And now Bill is fine. And I hope you remember that your father had more friends than you'll ever know. And take that forward in your life.
Thank you, Mary. I'm gonna call up Jill. Who's gonna share some words from JaTtik.
Hi, I'm Jill. I am Karen's sister and aunt to my amazing nieces, me and Jessie, who planned this whole thing. And I was asked just shortly ago to do this, which I'll be reading off my phone. And so please bear with me. I saw Steve through the lens of family, and in reading this memory from JaTtik Clark, who was an associate of his, it's so interesting and a privilege for me to read a bit of a story that was through an entirely different lens. So, from JaTtik Clark. Good afternoon to you all, and my sincerest and profuse apologies for not being able to attend this service in person. I've been asked to share a statement about my dear friend and musical colleague, Steve Norrell. Steve and I met many years ago at the Grand Teton Music Festival in Jackson, Wyoming. It's funny to think about now, but at that time, I had no idea what our relationship would be, what it would evolve to, and what it would mean to me, especially now. We played many summer seasons together at GTMF, and especially became roommates fairly early on as well, along with our dear friend Juan, fellow GTMF musician and contrabassoonist with the Atlanta Symphony. This would mean we spent a lot of time together, both on and off the instrument. As a musician, Steve embodied and displayed one of the most earnest, meticulous, dedicated, and devoted approaches to his craft. Many early mornings, I would wake up at our Teton Village or Aspen's condo and would hear Steve in his room buzzing away on a mouthpiece as part of his regular ritual, buzzing, breathing, and blowing. And occasional singing would fill the condo, attracting some of the local wildlife, such as foxes, and even a bull moose. Juan has the video somewhere as proof. Playing next to Steve in the GTMF orchestra had such a meaningful duality for me, as it was such a musical treat and also very educational. At the time, I had basically just started my professional career as an orchestral tubist, having recently joined the Oregon Symphony and having started my Grand Teton Music Festival tenure only a couple of years after that. Working with Steve was always an equal partnership, and he treated me like a full colleague despite my young age and nascent experience level career. We would play together every single afternoon on various duets and exercises, as well as playing through our GTMF orchestra repertoire for the various weeks. Steve would often request that of me because he was primarily an opera orchestra musician, and many of the pieces that were programmed those summers were not as common for him. I was always happy to accommodate him, since it allowed me to practice and perfect the material. Steve was also very supportive and never shy in encouraging me to work on improving my craft and abilities, and was always respectful and positive in his tutelage and instruction. Very often he would invoke the many maxims and phrases attributed to Arnold Jacobs, of whom he was a devoted and longtime student. For me, Steve could see my potential and would not allow me ever to sell myself short. These lessons were absolutely invaluable and vital to my growth and continued evolution as a musician, colleague, and human being. While he would often say that I carried him through a particularly difficult musical passage or piece, I hope Steve knows that he did quite a bit of carrying for me as well. It has been said that orchestral sections spend much more time together with each other than even their own families. I know that playing with the Met is more of a lifestyle than just a vocation,
with the countless hours of playing so many services and operas, some of which can last 5 to 6 hours, as the bass trombone voice of the Met for 30 plus years, Steve took an immense amount of pride and reverence in his work. He also had that same devotion to his family. For Kimmy, Jesse, and Karen, I know that he's smiling down and admiring all of you from afar. If I may be so bold, I also think and consider Steve as part of my family, in that he was a father figure, brother in arms, teacher guru, and devoted friend to me all at once. Undoubtedly, Steve's last few years on this planet with us were his toughest. He was dealing with a lot of health issues, as well as having to retire from his job. Not being able to play and perform as you once did has to be one of the cruelest things that can happen to a musician, and especially one of Steve's caliber and renown. We will all confront that eventually. No one worked harder than Steve to combat and overcome those issues, and he fought it every step of the way. Also, no one was more gracious, serene, and dignified as Steve, with navigating the hurdles that ultimately proved insurmountable. Even at the end of his life, I continue to learn and be inspired by him. In closing, I realize and apologize that I have said a lot here, yet it still somehow seems all too brief and woefully inadequate in expressing my thoughts and feelings regarding one Stephen Michael Norrell. Steve, I love you. I miss you. I thank you. And I will always try to remember and embody what you shared and taught me, along with countless others. Rest in peace, and until we meet again.
JaTtik, thank you so much for your message. And Jill, thank you for your beautiful reading. I'd like to call up Jesse to share some remembrances.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today, whether it be in person or virtually. Many of you know me or know of me. You may have seen me before if you had private lessons at my house and got inexplicably roped into doing our yard work. For those of you who don't know, I'm his daughter, Jessie, although you probably could have figured it out from my hair. So the typical thing to say in these situations is that my father was a complicated individual. I don't think that's quite the case here. There were some peculiarities, some quirks, some eccentricities, but at his core, he played the trombone. And I think that's how he would want to be remembered primarily. I was always aware that he was a world-class musician, but I didn't see it firsthand because to me, he was my dad. He was the person that would stop off at the grocery store after a grueling performance at the Met to buy lettuce for the guinea pigs. He loved them and they loved him most. He was also the man who always made sure the driveway was clear of snow so that my mother could drive her car to get to gigs in December, her busiest season. And he was the one who begrudgingly allowed me to learn saxophone, even though it doesn't have many parts in orchestras. I can only imagine how delighted he was when I switched to bass clarinet. But all of this underscores a point. You all knew him as your music teacher or seatmate or fellow professor. I knew him for a shorter period of time than many of you in this room, which led me to think, what did I learn from him? I learned how to play chess. I learned that whenever I show a weird skill, I say, how did I learn it? Well, I took a class at Juilliard, much to the confusion of my friends. I learned how to pronounce pecan. I learned to not force myself to be the first person off the airplane because I'm really not in a rush. We're all going to the same place. What I'm trying to say, albeit in a rather roundabout way, is that while I enjoy music and I like playing, I am not the inheritor of his trombone lessons. You all are. So thank you for carrying on that part of his legacy. I'd like to end with a quote by Isaac Newton. I'm an astrophysicist, so please forgive a little pretension. He wrote, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." And that word has occurred a few times throughout this service and a few times in memorials people have been posting to Facebook, so I thought it was appropriate to say, let us continue to stand on the shoulders of this giant.
Thank you, Jesse. That was beautiful. We're going to pause for another brief musical interlude. As we near the end of our time together today, I'm going to read the Mourner's Kaddish. For those of you who are mourning, if it is your tradition, feel free to rise. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah. Ve'alma tivrach herutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayachon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael. V'gala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. V'hei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam omeil maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitraman v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudashah v'richu. Le'ela min kol birchasa v'shirasa tushbechata v'nechamata. Dam Yaram B'alma v'imru amen. V'hei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru osei shalom v'ramav hu yasei shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May be seated. Thank you to everyone for your presence here today in person or from far away. Sharing your memories has been such a special honor, and we are going to join each other to continue to share memories and special moments upstairs. I'd like to share with you that Steve has been laid to rest in a private service at George Washington Memorial Park in Paramus. If you'd like to make a donation in his honor, the information is on the funeral website and also outside. We conclude the service with a song. Please join us upstairs to continue these beautiful memories.